Good evening, everybody. I'm Richard Dowden. I'm not an expert on Madagascar. I've only been there once. Although I've tried to cover the whole of Africa, it's one of those countries which I find so different to the rest of Africa that it really tends to be needed to be treated as a completely separate entity out on its own. And indeed, in the way that Africa is where we all come from and is so marked by humanity, it seems that Madagascar wasn't colonized by Homo sapiens until, I don't know, what are we talking, 3rd or 4th century, 5th century? We don't know quite when.
But the first millennium.
The first millennium. So it's human beings are quite new to this island, although it is just vast. And if you visit it, the two things I came away with. One was that it is disappearing, because you fly over it and you see all around it in the sea. The sea is red with the earth of Madagascar as it's washed away into the sea by farming methods that erode the soil. And the other one, as Stephen was reminding me as we were chatting, is that the population is increasing at an incredible rate. Africa's population is going up quite rapidly. It doubles every generation. Madagascar's out in front. So where the population is going up, the actual island is going down. But it's been coming to the news recently because of the politics. And I'll start by asking Stephen, how did this coup happen? An extraordinary coup, a repeat of the coup that brought Marc Ravalomanana to power. Seems to have been done to himself by the mayor of Antananarivo. How did this come about?
Well, one big difference, and I'll just go back a little bit. Marc Ravalomanana was the mayor of Antananarivo. He stood for presidential elections in 2001, and the elections were rigged, but he successfully insisted that he had been duly elected, and in fact that was true. So eventually he prevailed in 2002. So Marc Ravalomanana actually came to power through the ballot box in highly contested fashion. The coup which happened last month was, of course, completely unconstitutional in the sense that there was no ballot of any sort. But the fact that twice in the space of less than 10 years, the mayor of the capital city has successfully become president through a more or less hotly contested process is very striking. So the story is Marc Ravalomanana was elected president of Madagascar in 2002. He was re-elected and was deposed last month. Now, why was he deposed? What happened? Well, I think he made a number of mistakes. First of all, when Marc Ravalomanana became president of Madagascar, he was already one of the island's leading business people, and he carried on running his business interests as president. We've seen this elsewhere in the world, for example, with Prime Minister Berlusconi in Italy. It's not unheard of, but it is, it was very striking. So, of course, in those circumstances, when the president, makes a policy decision, you do tend to say to yourself, is this really in the national interest, or is it in the interests of his own businesses? I mean, among other things, he runs one of the country's leading supermarket chains, for example. He also treated the established political class with, I would say, contempt. So, which is not a good idea in the sense that it's one thing to displace a whole lot of established politicians, but if you treat them in that way, then, the opposition gets an extra edge to it.
But come back to the politics.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about Andry Rajoelina, and where he comes from.
Well, he's a young man, I think 34 years old at the moment. He's a businessman. He's made money by he had controlling billboard hoardings, advertising hoardings that you have by the roadside and so on. I mean, that was his thing. So, he comes out of the advertising industry. He was also quite well known as a disc jockey. He was on the radio. So, but I mean, he's clearly a smart, enterprising, intelligent, ambitious young man. He became mayor of Antananarivo a couple of years ago and used that as a platform to oppose the president, and got backing from many of the older political elite whom Marc Ravalomanana had dispossessed, offended, treated with contempt, including notably a man called Roland Ratsirka, who's the nephew of the former president. He also upset the French, which is quite significant, for various reasons, partly because Marc Ravalomanana doesn't speak particularly good French. He doesn't, he's not. He was not interested in keeping Madagascar. Madagascar, of course, is a former French colony. He really wanted to take it out of that rather suffocating relationship with France. He was very open to the English-speaking world and to Asia. So specific French interests were being ignored. But I think it went much further than that. I mean, he handled very badly his relations with France, and it came to a climax with last year when he declared the new French ambassador persona non grata. And he did this on the 14th of July, which of course is Bastille Day. From late December, early January, the mayor of Antananarivo, capitalizing on popular discontent with, we have the economic crisis, like I'm saying, there was discontent because of the reports of this negotiation with a South Korean company about agro-industrial investment, and the mayor of Antananarivo was getting his supporters out on the street demonstrating. So there was a series of increasingly high energy demonstrations, more and more people. And then at a certain point, the police force reacted badly. Some people, they shot some people, and once people get shot, then of course this is getting really rather nasty. There was another case when some of these demonstrations were sometimes turning violent. There were people attacking shops, notably shops that were owned by President Ravalomanana, as he was, looting the shops. At one point, some people were looting a supermarket. Somehow or other, the supermarket got set on fire. They died in the fire. So these kind of things, it was getting very nasty. It reached a kind of climax in late January, February time, and then the steam started to go out of the demonstrations, and Rajoelina, Mr. Rajoelina, the former mayor of Antananarivo, disappeared, and he got asylum in the French embassy. So I think, there was a feeling that France had saved his bacon, as it were, at a time when he was losing the power struggle. Then in early March, mysteriously, somebody distributed, it is said, I mean, this is popular rumor, I can't confirm it, I didn't see it with my own eyes, I haven't seen an eyewitness account, but there was some sort of political intervention with the commanders of the military garrisons around Antananarivo, and a number of middle-ranking officers joined the opposition and basically launched a coup. They put Mr. Rajoelina in power. They seized the central bank, eventually attacked the presidency, forced Mr. Ravalomanana out of office. So really what we had was a coup, and the current president, Mr. Rajoelina, is not really the master in his own house. I think the real power is with that faction of the army, because the armed forces are clearly not united, which supports Rajoelina. But I mean, I know for a fact, and it's been said by the leaders of the armed forces themselves, there are still supporters of the former president in the armed forces.